nearly Australia Day, and what better way to celebrate than with cake? Actually, what better way to celebrate any day ending in Y than with cake? What's more iconically Australian than Vegemite and koalas? What about if we put a koala on top of a Vegemite jar? And that's exactly what I've done for you guys today. I hope you enjoy. Even if you don't celebrate Australia Day, you will know that Vegemite is iconic to the Australian culture. We find ways to put it in everything. We put it in chips, we put it in cheese, we put it in pies and biscuits and nuts. There's even different sorts of Vegemite. There's light Vegemite, cheesy Vegemite, failed Vegemite, personalised Vegemite, even a special blend strong Vegemite. Now I know what you international peeps are thinking, stronger than you already have? Well, if you don't like Vegemite, chances are you're doing it wrong. Make sure your toast is hot, there's loads of butter and just a slither of Vegemite and you'll love it, I promise. Now to make this cake, I used 4 5-inch round chocolate mud cakes. On the bottom of the mud cakes, I put a 4-inch round board and filled it with simple syrup, and then, now don't knock it till you try it, Vegemite caramel Swiss meringue buttercream. It is delicious. I stacked it all up and then flipped it upside down and beveled those edges using that 4-inch board as my template. Tidying up, flipped it up the other way, used another 4-inch board the same way and beveled the other end. Flipped it back up again and tidied it up, put some ganache on my setup board to secure it, and off I went with my crumb coat. Now I slathered the cake with loads of ganache. Don't be stingy with your ganache when you're doing this part. Put loads on, it'll actually save you time and make it a heck of a lot easier. I smoothed the edges with my pastry scraper, like so. This part doesn't have to be beautiful, it is just the crumb coat. And then I'm using a thick acrylic smoother, which is basically a document wallet cut up. And I'm making sure that those edges stay beveled, both top and bottom. This is imperative to the overall shape of your jar. Very rough tidy up of the top, but it doesn't matter because we chill it, bring it back and put our final coat on. Doing all the same things, just a lot neater this time. There we go. Now to make the lid, I've taken a 5-inch round styrofoam dummy that's 1 inch high, and I've put another 4-inch board on the base of that. I roll out a lovely egg yellow fondant, and then I cover that styrofoam dummy in some vegetable shortening, pop the fondant over top and smooth it all on, like so. Cut off the excess, flip it upside down and pop those edges over to tidy it up. Smoothing, smoothing, smoothing. Then I take my X-Acto blade and tidy up those edges. Smoothing again, flip it up and there we have it. Just 1 second. I just want to give you a really quick history lesson. It's interesting, I promise. So in 1922, this guy, Cyril Percy Callister, was employed by Fred Walker Company, and they gave him the task of making a spread using yeast being dumped by local breweries. Initially, it didn't do too well, so they decided to rebrand it Pa Will. Why Pa Will, you say? Well, they were in competition with the English, and the English had Marmite. Now, if Marmite and Pa Will, well, Pa's gonna win. Well, it didn't work in this case, unfortunately. The public weren't really into the whole Pa Will thing, so it went back to being Vegemite, and it took a long time to take off. As a matter of fact, they gave it away with their cheese products for 2 whole years to try to promote sales. It wasn't until Vegemite was officially endorsed by the British Medical Association as a rich source of B vitamins that it started flying off the shelves. By the late 1940s, 9 out of 10 Australian homes had Vegemite on their kitchen tables. And the rest, they say, is history. Okay, back to it. So for the next part of the jar lid, I use my fancy tool called a toothpick, and I make indents along a line of fondant that's the same colour as the jar. The jar lid. I take an acrylic ruler that's about 2/3 the size of the side of the jar, and I just cut a strip out, like so. I take some vegetable shortening and just run it around the edge of the jar, and then run that strip over the vegetable shortening. Voila! We have a jar lid. Okay, now I decided to wrap my cake because the top's brown anyway, and you know, just made sense. Save some time, save some fondant, and a lot of people don't eat fondant anyway. I used a mixture of modelling chocolate and chocolate fondant and smoothed it all out, wrapped it around, joined it at the back, smoothed it all out, not forgetting those bevels, top and bottom. Smoothing the seam out here, and then I just took my X-Acto blade and cut off the excess on the top. Smoothed out the top, of course, remembering to bevel. Okay, so for this technique, most people use like acetate. I didn't have any on hand, so I just used the document pockets that you use in like foolscap folders for your foolscap paper. I had measured around the jar. This is for the label, so I'd measured around the jar. It turned out to be about 14 inches around and 4 inches high. I cut that strip and attached it to that plastic with vegetable shortening, and then wrapped it around the jar. I don't know if you've noticed, but a Vegemite jar has a different coloured lid to the label. The lid's slightly more orange and darker, so that's exactly what I did with this cake. And there you go. Once it's attached, you just smooth it all and on goes the lid. Oh, we nearly have a jar. I printed out the iconic Vegemite logo onto some edible paper with some edible ink, of course, and attached that with vegetable shortening also. And there we have it, our awesome Vegemite jar that needs a friend. Let's make the koala. Don't be scared, it's easier than it looks. To make his body, I took a grey piece of fondant and rolled it into a teardrop shape and sort of smoothed it down a little bit. Popped him on a piece of styro, took my blade and just lopped the top off so he's got somewhere to secure his head later on. I took a white piece of fondant and just rolled it out really thinly, and then I grabbed a petal cutter that was around the same size as the middle of his belly, cut out the petal shape and pointy end upwards, just attached that with a little bit of water and smoothed it onto his belly. For his legs, I've used my boning tool to indent the sides where his legs will be. Right there you go. And then I take the same coloured grey fondant and roll it into 2 small teardrops. Now I've used Tylose glue to attach this. It's just Tylose mixed with water. And I just pop them on nice and firmly and wrap them slightly around to his front. On both sides, of course, you know, koalas need 2 legs. To make his feet, 2 more little balls that I rolled into sort of fatter teardrop shapes. Then I took my Dresden tool and marked in some little paw marks, like so. Took my boning tool and made an area for the little pad for his little paw, and rounded out those toes a little bit more. Now to attach it, I did exactly the same thing, just a little bit of Tylose glue, and I was able to be a little firm here because he's got that little pad area so I could push it in reasonably firmly. There we go. Same for the other side, and there are his feet. Okay, so I took 2 small balls of black fondant, just rolled them up and popped them onto where the little pads are, like that. Took the boning tool and just flattened them out like so. You can round them out a little bit too. Now onto his arms. So I took a snake of grey fondant and I sort of smoothed it out in the centre, and then made like a ball at one end and smoothed it over at that end to make his little hand. Took the boning tool and made that little paw again, and then flipped it over, like so. Back in with my Dresden tool for his little paws. Oh, earlier I made a lamington. Of course I made a lamington. It was just a chocolate piece of fondant cut into a square, rolled in coconut. To attach his arms, I did the same thing. A bit of Tylose glue, and then I popped some Tylose glue in his hand so that the lamington would stick. Now, the position I want the arm in is upwards, so I just moved it upwards without attaching it with glue and popped a pin in there until later. Oh yeah, did you see that? I made a little meat pie too. To make his head, well, let's talk about his head for a minute. This is a warning to you all not to photograph your cakes in 40-degree heat outdoors. My koala really did not like that, not one little bit. See? He was wishing he was Audrey in Hillsville Sanctuary on that very same day. Audrey looks like she's got it made. Smile, Audrey. You sleep 18 hours a day. Gee. Anyway, back to making his head. Okay, so we've rolled out the head and smoothed that down, and then I've taken a piece of black fondant and made another sort of blunt teardrop shape for his nose. I take a dotting tool, which is sort of like a teeny tiny little ball tool to make his nostrils and his eye sockets. And then I took my Dresden tool to give him some character lines because we want a happy koala, not like Audrey. I roll some balls of black fondant and pop those into the eye sockets for his cute little eyeballs. There we go. Now I've taken my awesome sugar shaper tool, which is like a half moon sort of shape, pop it in there to make area for his mouth, and I took my Dresden tool to give him an upturned mouth because we want him to smile, not like Audrey. I put a little bit of black fondant in there in just a second, just to fill that out a little bit. Here we go. And then I smooth that out, roll out a tiny, tiny little teardrop shape of pink, pop that right in afterwards, smooth it down with another awesome sugar shaper, and there we go. Now to attach his head, I've now put a skewer into his body, and I just very carefully pop his head on top using some Tylose glue, and see the position of that lamington? I wanted it right up to his little mouth. So I've attached that to his mouth with a little bit of Tylose glue, and we're good to go. Onto his little Akubra, because that's pretty Aussie too. It's just a little dome of camel sort of coloured fondant, and I've made a little indent in the centre. I'll roll out the same fondant and make a circle cut with that, smooth out those edges, attach a little bit of Tylose glue and pop the little domed bit on top like that. Now it's all in the details. So I've rolled out a tiny little snake of fondant in dark brown and just wrapped it around the rim there. Attaching that with some Tylose glue too. To attach his hat, some more glue on his head, a little skewer for added security, and then we pop it on. He's so cute. To make his ears, take the same grey again. 2 circles, of course, because 2 ears, like 2 arms and 2 legs, and 2 circles. The same with white. The white's quite a bit thinner, and I've gone down one size with the circle cutter. Attach the white onto the centre of the grey with some more Tylose glue. And then I cut it about 2/3 down to make it easier to attach. Like so. I say like so a lot. To attach the ears, use some Tylose glue and pop it on securely, sort of folding it inwards a little bit to make it look a little bit more realistic. Not that he's a realistic koala, but you know what I mean. And there he is, our gorgeous little Aussie koala eating a lamington and a meat pie. To attach him to the jar, I just put a little bit of ganache under his backside, and there he is, sitting proudly on the iconic Australian Vegemite jar. Anyway guys, that's it, and I hope you really enjoyed this video. Happy Australia Day to all of my Aussie mates, and for those of you that are in other parts of the world, January 26th is Australia Day for us. Why don't you make it Try Vegemite the Right Way Day? I've told you how to do it, give it a go. I'll see you next time, bye.